This is my Geometry Dash level, Clusterfunk, loosely inspired by the main level, Clusterfunk. I've already made 2 videos about working on this level, and you can also check those out if you want. For this video, I had a pretty cool idea for a fake ending. Stuff like this has already been done a few times, so I'm not the most original person here. Still, this level uses the song Massacre V2 by Phantomenk, which is an extended version of the original Massacre by the same guy. The exact point I planned to put my fake ending is where the extension starts, so there's a little bit of attention to detail there. The song here goes absolutely haywire, and it sounds like it's glitching out. I wanted my level to reflect this, so I put together a multi-step plan to carry this out. Step 0. Gaslight my entire stream chat. And that's the end of the level! You can play it now, if you want. There it is. Go ahead, play. He would, very soon after, delete the level from the servers. Alright, so step 1 is that I need to make a fake end wall. One of these things at the very end. You know, it has this on the edge, I believe. Because I want to make it look like the end of the level is right after this triple spike. And then, boom, the triple spike moves over, kills the player. They didn't make it to the end, but little do they know it was all a lie all along. I'm so mischievous. Alright, so you'll see the end wall at the end of levels typically looks something like this. Right here. So that's what we'll be recreating. Shouldn't be hard to do. Like I was showing before, I'm just going to place down a bunch of these. Probably extend the end wall a couple blocks just in case it shows up. I'll move this all to like T3. The normal end wall for Geometry Dash I think is on T2, so I might even put it on T4 to be honest. Then the next step in making an accurate end wall is to place a bunch of player colored blending glow like this, except for I can just whoop. And I can't remember if this is like extra dark than the normal like tile set that it uses over here. So I'm gonna look at a level that doesn't have a super dark ending like Clusterfunk does. That was a bad choice. No, when you compare it to these blocks here, that's the same darkness. We're just gonna set this to no touch. It doesn't really need to be set to that. Just, I don't know, felt like it. Also, for scientific purposes, how many blocks is the end wall away from the last object you place? I could pretty easily figure this out by doing something like this. So if we just move this over here, and move this with a move trigger, then let's see. Alright, so the end wall is about 10.5 blocks away from the grid space where you placed the last object in the level. So let's go ahead and move this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and a half. And the final thing we need to do is, you remember this end wall kind of has these particles going inwards towards the wall itself. Now this used to be very, very hard to do, but fortunately we have a little tool called the particle trigger that makes this actually extremely easy. Right, let's set this to player color. And we'll want to go in and make it use object color, so it doesn't use these colors up here and instead uses the color channel it's set to. And now, I think, how do we get this to look like it's supposed to look? We set it to radius first of all. Start radius, okay. Yeah, we increase the start radius. It starts from out here and then goes inward towards the center. And let's make the angle, set it to 0 like that. So now it's, okay, yeah, now it's coming in from the left and going to the right. And now I think we want the start size to be quite a bit bigger. Let's increase the start radius a little bit more. That's more accurate to how it's supposed to look. I mean, that looks pretty convincing. That looks pretty convincing. Alright, so now the main problem here is the fact that you just keep moving towards the end wall. That's not how it's supposed to work. The camera's supposed to stop moving the moment the end wall comes on screen, and we should be able to make that happen pretty easily. If we give this a group. I forgot I'm using that many groups. Don't worry about that. And now we place down a camera edge trigger. 1440. Right. That's our right-facing edge, and now hopefully that works. Yeah, there we go. Alright, so the fake end wall is done. It looks like we kind of complete the level in a weird, unconventional sense, but that's not what we want. We want the player to die painfully. So that brings us on to step 2, which is kill the player. I've changed the background to a deep red for this occasion. First of all, let's give these spikes a new group, 578. That one's available now, apparently. And we move 578 over half a block. Right at the last second here. So evil, so maniacal. I am brimming with excitement at my scheme. Yes, yes. You know what, while we're at it, we might as well just move everything. Just all of it. 578. So now that looks like this. The player kind of like glitches backwards, but we don't actually want to kill the player. We just want to kill the player, if you get what I mean. Meaning we will set these spikes to no touch. And now the problem with that, of course, is the player just keeps moving, which we don't want. That should be pretty simple to solve. Let's just copy paste this trigger, set to lock to player X. I did not want to screenshot the screen, but thank you. For an extended period of time. There we go. The background keeps moving, which looks weird. Let's make that not happen with a simple background speed trigger, setting the background speed to 0. Maybe I can make the spikes look like they're glitching out a little more by giving them a new group. 583, and then kind of like moving them back and forth really quick like this. There we go, now it looks kind of like it's glitching out. What did I die to? I can probably make this look like it's glitching out a little bit more if I use a glitch trigger. Let's preview shaders really quick. What does that look like? Let's up the speed of that and then have it end after just a split second. And click off screen, thank you. Maybe like a little glitch sound effect to go along with it. Yeah, I like that. So it just glitches into place. Alright, so the last thing I'm gonna do is make it so this transition happens the same every time. And just to test something out, I'm going to make these touchable once again. I'm going to show hitboxes on Mega Hack. In order to show hitbox trail, I'm going to align a pink pad just so the player just barely jumps over these spikes. So you see the player's hitbox trail here, and then you see the spikes hitbox here. I want those to just barely not touch each other, so I'll move this pad over. Ooh, yeah, that's really close. Can I get away with one of these mini steps? I cannot. Alright, perfect. Just like that. I'm going to hide this pad and make it have no effects, because if I don't turn on no effects, then you can kind of see that little pink circle that appears for a second. We want it to look like the player's just jumping. So no effects. I'll also make it so the player can't legitimately jump. Hopefully people click right at the last second and it makes it feel like they did a real click. But yeah, I just want to make sure this happens exactly the same every attempt. Okay, wait, does the pink pad bounce the... I thought it bounced the player just as much, just as high as they jump. Let's see, does it look like they're going to make that jump? I think the pink pad jump is just slightly lower than the actual player jump, but we can circumvent this with slightly lower gravity. That should solve the problem. And then we'll just turn the gravity back to normal here. Yeah, there we go. So if I click, it feels like I'm doing a real jump. But I'm not, it's a lie! Yeah, no, I like that. Of course, now we want to make it look like the player dies, which should be fairly easy to do. Step 1 to make that happen is simply hide the player. And I'm gonna use speed hack to see if it happens at a good time, kind of when you'd expect it. Yeah, it does! That's about when you'd hit the spike's hitbox. So we're good on that. Of course, the next part of the player death effect is of course the explosion effect. Sadly, I can't use the default explosion effect for the player. I just have to use one of these animated objects. There's a lot of them. Let's go with this one. Let's give this a group 2,900, nice round number. Let's animate on trigger, quickly have that follow the player until the moment they die. So we'll stop group 2,901. These are such good group values for the video. When I make a video, I definitely like my groups to be well into the thousands for optimal viewing experience. I'm gonna turn off animate on trigger actually so I can get the colors right on this. Maybe I'll layer a couple of these. Might look better. Okay, those are starting at different times, but that should stop being a problem once I set this. Why is it randomized start? Okay, that is the problem. We will animate 2,900. I'm so glad the animate trigger has an actual use now. I'm also glad you can't just do the same exact thing with the spawn trigger. Alright, that needs to lock to the player X. So let's give that group 578, like everything else has. Cool. Yeah. It looks like the player dies. It definitely looks like the player dies. Now all we need is to make it sound like the player dies. Unfortunately, the sound effect trigger doesn't include geometry dash sound effects, like the GD death sound effect. You just get stuff like this.
As death wills it.
However, I have circumvented this issue with an ingenious workaround. If we pull up my Newgrounds page really quick. There we go. Yeah, that's the stuff. New best song in the Geometry Dash Awards 2026. Please nominate Super Sad Death Song I Cried. I was already messing around with this effect and I placed down some song triggers specifically to play that song. To make it happen at just the right time, I preload the song, Super Sad Death Song I Cried, and then I set it to channel 2, which is different from the channel the main song's playing on, so they can play at the same time. And then I just load the prep, and that should sound something like this. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. Would you look at that? Oh my god, it works so well! Whoa! I went into the end wall! It looks like it's real! That's crazy! I think these particles are a little slow. I can't stop playing this, I'm sorry, it's just too cool. Alright. Alrighty-o. Our next step in my checklist is the death loop. Let me change the background color again, it's good for video retention, probably, I don't know. Alright, so this is pretty simple. I want it to feel like everything's glitching out, and my first step in doing that is going to be having the player die over and over again, kind of like glitch back into place and then fall back down and explode again. And that should be very, very simple to do. All we have to do is, first of all, place an object right here, give that a new group, 2902. We teleport the player to 2902, ignore X, so it only teleports them vertically. We'll turn off preview on that. Let's turn off effect, show the player for a split second before hiding them again, and I can adjust the distance between these two. We'll play the explosion sound effect again, animate the death effect, and that should be good. Let's see, how's that look? Nice, yeah. That's about what I was looking for. Cool. Now at the very end of Super Sad Death Song I Cried, I have a couple extra death sound effects, like this. And we'll be using some of those to make it sound like the player's rapidly dying. I just can't play this over and over too long. It has to load the song every single time I use it, which is why I didn't originally have those bits at the end of the Super Sad Death Song I Cried, but I added them there because I couldn't, like, place a bunch of these like this. It didn't work. Alright, I have a bunch of these song triggers up here. I already kind of figured out the exact points in the song that play those other, like, layered death sounds. So I just gotta grab one of these. What part's this? Okay, that's not one of them. There we go. So let's try placing one of these. Prep. Load prep. A couple blocks later. I'm gonna place another object closer to the spike like this. Because the player's gonna have to die a lot more rapidly here. Let's see, how's that look? Honestly, I could actually move that back up a little bit. I then proceeded to place a whole bunch of these song, teleport, hide player, and show player triggers throughout this part. Not exactly the most interesting thing to watch, so I'll skip over it. So I think we're pretty much done with this effect for now. Once I start on the next part of this level, I do want to work on the transition from this part into that part, but that'll be a little ways off before I do that. I think right now I just want to add a little bit of polish, and we should be good. Maybe add some more glitches, you know? Then, I placed a whole bunch of glitch shaders and glitch sound effects to fill out the rest of the part. So far so good. But, then that's where disaster struck. I, muted my mic for a second. I don't remember why. And then I, forgot to turn it back on. Fortunately, it didn't stay like this for long, but that still means I have to do a little bit of post-commentary here. Actually, it's kind of hard to explain what I did next with the original footage, kind of a you-had-to-be-there thing. So I'll just recreate the effect now and explain it. I'll use Clusterfunk for this example, because it seems fitting. I was trying to come up with more ways to make it look like the level was glitching out. One idea I had was to sporadically move the camera back to old parts of the level just for a split second before moving it right back into place. I did this by first scattering a bunch of camera guides around the level. I then placed this column of static camera triggers, each set to a different guide. After a random amount of time using spawn delays, it lets you put this extra, like, random modification here, the camera would move back to the original guide with another static camera trigger. Now I place an advanced random trigger and enter the group of each row. The final step is to make this random trigger spawn activated and multi-trigger, give it a group, then place another spawn trigger with the same group set to spawn triggered and multi-triggered with another random delay. Now, every time this spawn trigger triggers itself, it'll trigger again after a random amount of time and activate a random row. We just need to place one more spawn trigger with no groups, not set to spawn triggered, triggering group 22. And the whole loop will start when the player reaches this trigger. You can see the whole thing in effect right here. I really hope that made sense. Oh boy, I just realized I've been muted this entire time. That's great. Oh, that's awesome. Well, post-commentary jam, you're gonna have some fun. So what I'm doing here is I'm deciding to move the camera around back to these different random spots in the level, so it kind of looks like it's glitching out and showing other parts of the level. I explained it better before. Anywho, I decided to make these randomized. So I'm giving each one of these a new group. Which one am I on? There we go. I'm good at conserving groups. Okay, these static camera triggers over here are the ones that reset the camera back to this static camera trigger over here, which the camera has been following throughout this part. And I'm going to make these get spawned after a random amount of time after it kind of moves back to the other spots in the level. Let's say between 0.05 and 0.15 seconds. Okay, and now I need to make an advanced random trigger that chooses between all these different static camera triggers here. So these have groups 2, 9, 17, and every odd number up to 2, 9, 3, 3. Save again, I'm paranoid. Whoops, I forgot 2, 9, 21. And 33, there we go. This needs a group. 2, 9, 3, 5. And now this will get spawned. There you are. This will get spawned every, let's say, 0.5 to 3.5 seconds. That seems good. And this will be a spawn loop. We'll set that to 2935. And finally, have all this get spawned. Where do I want this to start? Around here. Alright, it'll get spawned right at this moment. So I'll just move everything over. Notate that this is starting the entire insane loop. Why did I do this? I should look cool, hopefully. Alright, it happened once. Now you can see the effect in effect with Clusterfunk. I'm only saying this because I had absolutely no reaction while recording. I just do that sometimes. New epic idea for a little more variation here. What if all these random ass camera guide triggers had a group that just moved around really sporadically? And since these static camera triggers over here are not set to follow, it'll just move to wherever the camera guide trigger is when it moves to it, and it won't move with the guide, if that makes any sense. This just randomizes things a little bit more. You can kind of see that in this example, though it's a bit hard to tell. Alright, honestly, a couple more random loops like this with like camera zoom and background color, and I feel like this part will look pretty chaotic, and then I might call it good for now. I wish you could randomize the values on a pulse trigger, but you can't. This is a good way to indicate what I'm doing. I forgot to mention, because I am great at live commentary, but this is a randomized loop that changes the background color at random times. Here's an example of all that finished. I love how I say absolutely nothing every time I preview this part, it's great. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Oh, you know what this needs? Some split screen shenanigans. I won't make these randomized, I'm tired of randomizing things. You know, honestly, I think I'm pretty happy with this. I think it's in a good place for now. I was gonna add some more effects, like some edit color shaders, maybe hue shaders, camera zooms, but honestly, I think this is plenty. I think this is more than enough. Yeah, that's cool. I'm happy with that for now.
Later.
Alright, so it's been a little while, and since recording the rest of this video, I have made the transition out of this part into the next part, and I'm just gonna go ahead and show you the transition right now in its finished state, and then after I show you, so that's the transition, pretty cool, it kind of glitches into this very, very difficult section. This is where the level's supposed to like kind of turn around and become a lot harder. But anyway, I want to show you how I made that transition, and in order to do that, I'm just gonna make a new level, because I think it's easier to do it this way. Alright, so essentially what I need to do is I need to make two separate parts. One down here, and one up here, and then one part will be using this camera, the other part will use this camera up here. That's how I did it in Clusterfunk. Alright, so I've made a couple example levels here. This took a hot minute. I put a lot more effort into this than I needed to. But you can see the first one looks like this. I put less effort into this one. The one I put more effort into if I switch these static camera triggers is this one up here. I don't know. I kind of got into a flow. It looks pretty neat. So I actually have this level set to dual mode, so there's 2 players at once. I have unlink dual gravity over here, and I have like a teleport portal set up and stuff. And what that essentially means is if we look at the path of the ship that's flying around, it should be exactly the same on the top and bottom. That should make this example a little bit easier to follow. Alright, and to help ease you into what I'm going to be doing next, I want you to remember this static camera trigger is making the camera follow group 6, which is this camera guide right here, and this static camera trigger is following group 15, which is this camera guide up here. So if I have this static camera trigger come after, it does the one on the top. If I have this static camera trigger come after, it does the one on the bottom. Pretty simple. And so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna place these static camera triggers after the level starts and copy paste a bunch of them, like so. It should look something like this. That's pretty trippy. That's so weird. That's weird. And so now I'm gonna teach you how to do a little thing called a flicker mask. I'm going to do something similar to what I just did, except for a lot more rapid. And don't worry, I'll warn you once I'm gonna preview it, so if you have like photosensitive epilepsy, you can look away. Okay, so I've used this trick a few times before in my video, but I'll show you how to do it again. This little setup right here will trigger any triggers down here set to group 2 every single frame. So what I do is I have a spawn trigger set to group 2, affecting group 1 with a 0.0001 second delay. And then I have an item compare trigger set to group 1, that's what this is spawning, and it's affecting group 2. And what I'll do, because item ID 0 is not equal to 1, I'll make true ID not affect any groups, and it only will continue the loop if item ID 0 is not changed. In fact, let me change that to item ID 2, which is set to 0 by default. This spawn trigger right here spawns group 2, it's not set to any groups, it's not set to spawn trigger, so this starts the loop. And you'll see this pickup trigger right here is increasing item ID 1 by 1 every single frame, which this counter object right here should reflect. Yep, you can see. You can see how this works. Now, if I set item ID 2 to 1, that will override this item compare trigger, make it stop outputting. And what I'm going to do is give this a group, make that spawn triggered, and right at the start of the level, I'm going to spawn group 3 with a 1 second delay. And what you'll see... That's wrong. Wait, I'm stupid. This needs to happen at the same time this loop starts. Okay, what you'll see is that it ends on exactly 240, which is the FPS that Geometry Dash runs at. Now this is exactly 4 times the 60 FPS you normally get on YouTube. And in fact, that's the highest FPS you can get on YouTube, is 60, sorry. However, if the quality on your video is set to 480p, I think it is, or less, it'll actually play at 30 FPS. So that's 1/8 the frame rate that Geometry Dash natively runs at. All of that to say that if we want this static camera loop switching back and forth to go as fast as possible, while still being a visible effect for as many people as possible, 30 FPS is what we want to shoot for. I'll just paste the loop thingy I just used for that example into this level and build helper it to give it new groups. Does that work? Alright, yeah, it's doing its thing. You can see that number ticking up. So if we want the camera to switch at exactly 30 FPS, this is pretty easy to do. We want to make both of these spawn triggered, multi-trigger. We'll give this group 21. We'll give this group 22. And now all we have to do is use the lovely sequence trigger. Honestly, this trigger is really underrated. It's so useful. And set it to affect group 21 exactly 8 times, and then 22 exactly 8 times. Don't forget to set this to mode loop, so it loops Set this to spawn trigger, multi-trigger, and I'll just set this. These group numbers are wrong. What group is this? 19. There we go, I updated the group labels. We will set this to group 19. We can go ahead and delete that. Okay, why is that off center? Okay, moment of truth. Photosensitive epilepsy warning. I will tell you when it's safe to look again. Oh, yeah, that's about what it should look like, but the effect is very much not done here, and at this moment I'm going to show you how to do what I call a flicker mask. I'm just gonna go ahead and copy paste the mask I made for Clusterfunk. Very cool. Essentially what you want to do is you want to make two masks that perfectly line up with each other like this. See, if I move this one over just a tiny bit, you'll see it perfectly fills in the gaps of this half of the mask right here, and vice versa. You can do this with gradient triggers, but I wouldn't recommend because gradient triggers don't work with the UI trigger. You can't have gradients follow the UI, which is annoying, but that's how it is. And we're gonna be using the UI trigger for this because it makes things a lot easier, especially if your camera zoom is different on both of these, like your camera rotation and stuff. This bypasses all of that. So I'm gonna copy the purple of these hexagons right here, and I'm gonna paste that color onto this half of the mask. And then what color channel is this? Color channel 6. I'm gonna give this half of the mask the same green that the giant gradient in the background here has. It helps if you make the colors of this mask like really similar to the colors you can see in this part of the level. That makes the mask less intrusive. Alright, so now all we need to do is place down a camera guide trigger. Make sure that the edge of the camera comes before the second mask starts. I might even move it over a little bit because some people play on widescreen, although it doesn't matter for the video. Yeah, we want to give this a group 23. We want to give these a group 24, and we want to have 24 block to group 23, and that just means that at the start of the level when it loads, these will be in the same position relative to the camera that they are here, and that'll stay like that for the entire level. I'm gonna want to set this to center instead of auto to make sure these don't get like scaled or moved at all. And yeah, you can see we're covered by a giant block of purple. If I move this camera guide over, you'll see that it's working. Now we're covered by this pattern. I'm gonna want these to move to the left until this one here fully covers the camera. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's 400 on a move trigger, maybe just a little bit extra. We'll say move over minus 410, which is 41 grid spaces, and that is group 24. I'll make it go a little slower so I can really show you the example pretty effectively here. In fact, even like 2 seconds. Wow, look at it go. Alright, now there's really only one step left to make the flicker mask work. I will warn you again, if you have photosensitive epilepsy, I will tell you when to look away here. It shouldn't be as bad as before though. Okay, we need to give these separate groups, so... Oh, these still have the groups from when they were in Clusterfunk. We can remove those. Give these separate groups, 25, 26. Okay, now this static camera trigger here is the one that snaps the camera to the bottom one, and this static camera trigger here moves it to the top. So when the cameras snap to the bottom one here, I want to activate group 26 and deactivate group 25, so it only shows the mask on the right side here. And now we do the exact opposite, like this. As you can probably see, I completely messed this up. Both of them are toggling on group 26 and toggling off group 25. It should look like this example right here. I spent a really long time trying to figure out what was wrong. This caused me so many issues. It's not even funny for when the camera moves up here, which will only show the left side of the mask here. Now I made these spawn triggered, multi-triggered, and if we just give these the same groups as the static camera triggers that they're in line with, this should probably work unless I did something wrong. Okay, photosensitive epilepsy warning, look away if you need to. Alright, so that should look something like this. Yep, that's the effect. That's pretty neat. So what that does is it makes it look like both are on screen at the same time, but if I were to slow down this loop quite a bit, I think I'm gonna make it go like a lot slower. Here. You can see both are not showing on screen at the same time. It's just swapping back and forth between the two images so fast that it looks like both are on the screen at the same time. If I set this back to normal, then yeah, it's a pretty cool effect. Of course, the only issue is that it's very flickery, so this doesn't look good in a lot of settings. Fortunately, in Clusterfunk, the level is like intensively glitching out, so it doesn't feel out of place. Oh, it's safe to look, by the way. I'm done with the example, unless this glitching is too much for you, in which case maybe don't look. But yeah, you can see the effect right here. Yeah, just like that, and that's how I did that. Anyway, that's all I have for now. That's it. The transition, the fake ending, all of it's done. I'll just go ahead and show you another little preview of the level. So yeah. One part will be using this camera, and now all we have to do is use the lovely sequence trigger. And now all we have to do is use you'll see it perfectly fills in the gaps of this. Alright, so now all we need to do